stance deteriorates. You see, she can no longer maintain the fiction that Karenina can't feel, that he's a moral monster, that persecutes her, all those things. She's just herself said that he is infinitely better than he even knew. And yet, she still wants to run off with Vronsky. She's a romantic. How does she manage, if she can't use that excuse, how does she manage to do it? That's the second question, which we're going to see here. Both of these you get in the rest of part 4. Life is not made better by the cult of the great, the dramatic, the melodramatic, the high, the super high moment. That makes for great romances and adventure stories. But that is why romance and adventure are false pictures of life. And why a real realist will have a character who might believe in that way, and believes in romance. But the book is not showing that. The book is showing that what matters is the opposite, the ordinary facts of daily life. You can't get away from it. So if you turn now to chapter 19, page 477 here. The mistake made by Alexandrovich, when preparing to see his wife, he had overlooked the possibility that her repentance might be sincere, that he might forgive her, that she might not die. This mistake was brought home to him in all significance 2 months after his return from Moscow. It's now 2 months later. But the mistake made by him had arisen not simply from his having overlooked that contingency, but also from the fact that until the day he looked at his dying wife, he had not known his own heart. At his wife's sickbed, he had for the first time given way to that feeling of warm compassion always aroused in him by the suffering of others, and hitherto looked on him with shame as a harmful weakness, and pity for her, and remorse for having desired her death. And most of all, the joy of forgiveness made him at once conscious not merely of the relief of his own suffering, but also of the spiritual peace he had never experienced before. He suddenly felt that the very thing that was the source of his sufferings had become the source of his spiritual joy. That what had seemed to him insoluble while he was judging, blaming, and hating had become clear and simple when he forgave in love. He forgave his wife and pitied her for her sufferings and her remorse. He forgave Vronsky and pitied him, especially after reports reached him of his desperate action. Remember, Vronsky goes back and tries to kill himself, shoots himself. And remember, it's partly because of he thinks that Anna has now abandoned him, but it's also partly out of sheer humiliation with the switch of roles with Karenina. He felt more for his son than before, and he blamed himself now for having taken too little interest in him. But for the newborn little girl, he felt a special sentiment, not of pity, but of tenderness. Now get this sentence that's going to follow. At first, from a feeling of compassion alone, he had been interested in the delicate little creature who was not his child, and who was cast to one side during her mother's illness, and would certainly have died if he had not troubled about her. And he did not himself observe how fond he became of her. Remember, key information given in the middle of a long paragraph, a long sentence, one clause among many. He saves her life, who would certainly have died if he had not tended to her. Within the course of the novel, he is the only character who saves a life, and it's not a small thing to do. Save one life, and your own life has become needed. And yet, I don't know any commentators on this book until the one that I wrote, pointing to this passage. And it's clear why, because it's buried It's just like that passage about how whenever he went to bed 10 minutes later than usual, she asked him the reason. Very camouflage, right? You have to learn to see what's right in front of your eyes, but your attention is distracted from it to something else which you regard as more important. And so it doesn't really register. Learning how to redirect your attention, to stop looking at the dramatic things and look at the small things that might be right there, right before your eyes, but invisible. That's part of the lesson Tolstoy is giving you here. Maybe he gives it too well, and that's why people really do miss the crucial information, but it is here. He would go into the nursery several times a day and sit there for a long while, so that the nurses, who were at first afraid of him, got quite used to his presence. Sometimes for half an hour at a stretch, he would sit silently gazing at the saffron-red, downy, wrinkled face of the sleeping baby, watching the movements of the frowning brows and the fat little hands with clenched fingers that rubbed the little eyes and nose. At such moments, particularly, Alex Alexandrovich had a sense of perfect peace and inner harmony, and saw nothing extraordinary in his position, nothing that ought to be changed. But as time went on, he saw more and more distinctly that however natural the position now seemed to him, he would not long be allowed to remain in it. He felt that besides the blessed spiritual force controlling his soul, there was another, a brutal force, underlying that phrase, as powerful or more powerful, which controlled his life, and that this force would not allow him that humble peace he longed for. He felt that everyone was looking at him with questioning amazement, that he was not understood, and that something was expected of him. And on the next page, during all this difficult time, Alex Alexandrovich had noticed that his worldly acquaintances, especially women, they took a peculiar interest in him. All these acquaintances, he observed, had difficulty concealing a kind of mirth, the same mirth that he had perceived in the lawyer's eyes, and just now in the eyes of his groom. You understand that what's happening is everybody is, get a load of him. Here is this absurd husband being nice to his wife's lover, even though she's just had the lover's child. What's wrong with this guy? People don't mean him any harm, but anything that violates the normal human conduct seems peculiar. And if he actually enjoys this, or seems it's a good thing, it seems ridiculous. And so it arouses a kind of mirth. He's always being laughed at or made fun of. In some way, tacitly humiliated. This is that brutal force. The brutal force is the same thing as that elemental force which prevents Levin's innovations and reforms from taking hold. Remember that the elemental force is not a single conspiracy. It's not conspiracy-minded people would think, somebody's organized, something again. No. It's just the sum total of habits. It runs against the normal way of doing things. These reforms from the top down. And they can't succeed. Because, it's like, remember the bolt in the threshing machine. All you have to do is lose your focus once, and a bolt will fall into the machine. And nobody can keep their attention riveted that way. It's asking the impossible. Our mind is always wandering. The elemental force that sum total of habits now is directed at Karenina, who is also trying to do something that can't be done because it runs against everybody's normal way of behaving and thinking. And that's why he constantly encounters that mirth, that humiliation. On the next page, you get a scene where there's this nurse and the governess, and the baby is crying, remember, and he determines from the old nurse who's in the family for a long time that the problem is not the baby is sick, it's probably that the wet nurse has no milk. And he says, well, why, if you knew that, why didn't you say something? And she replies, who am I to say it to? You understand the implication of that? The implication is you can't tell Anna because Anna's ill, can't be done. And the baby's father isn't around. So it's an implication that he is not the father, and therefore, why wouldn't you tell it to him? So he detects this allusion to his position. You see. Now, she doesn't mean him any harm. Some people laugh at him like Betsy Tverskaya really do mean harm. There are some nasty people. But most of the time, it's just these constant pinpricks. And if you, not in part 4, but as the novel continues, he gets lonelier and lonelier. When Anna leaves, he simply has no one to talk to because he's never had anyone to talk to. There had been his brother who had died long ago, but that's all. You also get the story, by the way, as this is going on, about how Anna and Karenina got married. Remember that Karenina was in the provinces, building his career at that point, and Anna was living with her aunt, and her aunt decided to entrap this wealthy, well-positioned man into marriage, so kept inviting him to the house, and then said, by custom, because you keep coming here, that's a statement that you're going to marry him. Just the way Kitty's parents thought that Vronsky didn't. But Karenina, deciding, well, if that's the only honorable thing to do is to marry her, I'll marry her. In his naivete, he got kind of trapped. And yet, for a while, he was, in spite of, he put, it says, all the love and emotion he was capable of into this. And for a while, he had someone to talk to. But now, the loneliness overcomes him. There's that wonderful scene where he's thinking of maybe saying something to his secretary who knows him so well for many, many years. And just at the point when he's about to say, so you've heard of my troubles, he only winds up saying, so you'll get that ready for me tomorrow? It's a moment of real sadness. He can't communicate. And he winds up getting this award, the sort of award you get that they give people who were once significant and no longer are. The gold watch after 25 years of service, goodbye. Only he's, since even so powerful, it's a little more than that. But it's a sign you only get this sort of award when your time is over. And so he's being given this award, and when he goes to the celebration, everybody is laughing at him. Goes into this room with this sea of hostile eyes, and in that whole room, he's thinking, oh, Do they do their loving differently? Those thick-calved gentlemen, those Vronskys and Oblonskys, do they do their loving differently? He feels, again, humiliated. But across that sea of laughing eyes, there's one pair of eyes fixed on him with love and adoration, and they belong to the Countess Lydia Ivanovna. And the Countess Lydia Ivanovna is the model of a fake Christian. She's a person who is filled with condescension, nastiness, a taste for cruelty, above all the sense that she is holier than thou, better than anybody else. But all of this, she manages to state, and to convince herself. She states it in Christian language and convinced that no matter how bad a thing she does, she can find some Christian justification for it. And her Christianity gets stranger and stranger, more and more what we would call sect-like or cult-like. But that was considered good among the aristocrats back then. And Karenin falls into her hands. Out of loneliness, out of the impossibility of staying on the pinnacle that he was on, all alone, and running against the brutal force. Called brutal, instead of elemental here, because its effects are brutal, but it's the same thing. And he winds up in her hands, and therefore becoming awful in the way she directs. That's what becomes really, really sad here. Well, that doesn't happen right away, though. We've already had 2 months, and there's still, we go back to part 4, where he is still at the height of Christian love. And Anna is talking now to Stiva, and we get how she is going to rationalize running off with Vronsky now when she can't use her old justifications. So if you turn to page 486 at the bottom, she says, "I have heard it said that women love men even for their vices," Anna began suddenly, "but I hate him for his virtues." This is a phrase that you don't think up on the spur of the moment, right? It's like Straussky's phrase of, 3 things are needed to educate people: schools, schools, and schools. Either she's heard this before, or she has worked it out, as a witticism. Witticisms like that, the ideal of a witticism is that you say it perfectly at the perfect moment. And, you don't, but people retell the stories if they do. There's a wonderful story of the painter James Whistler, who was also very famous as a wit, with Oscar Wilde, who was famous as a wit. And they heard somebody making a very witty comment. And Wilde says, "I wish I had said that." And Whistler replies, "You will, Oscar, you will." See, the witticism is supposed to be spontaneous, thought of at the moment, but yet perfectly worked out, not memorized. Well, she must have worked this one out. It's too perfect otherwise, you see. "I've heard women love men for their vices, but I hate him for his virtues. I can't live with him. Do you understand? The sight of him has a physical effect on me. It enrages me. I can't live with him. What am I to do? I was unhappy and used to think one couldn't be more unhappy, but the terrible state of things I am going through now, I could never have conceived. Would you believe it? That knowing he's a good man, a splendid man, that I'm not worth his little finger, still I hate him. I hate him for his generosity. And there's nothing that for me but this." You should think of this as a Dostoevsky emotion, right? "Why do you hate so-and-so so much?" "Well, he's never done me any harm, but I once played a nasty trick on him, and I've never forgiven him for it. He is so good, I hate him for it because that makes me feel bad that he's so good." Okay? That's the reason she's using this pure Dostoevskian reason. She used to hate him for his unfeelingness. Now she hates him for his compassion. And you can see it does make a kind of psychological sense. You can do that, particularly if you're focused on yourself there, and it will feel like that. So Siva goes to Karenina, who is prepared to do anything that might make the situation better for her, for the children. He's thinking of both, including the one that's on his own. That's why the phrase, the children, keeps occurring. And Siva says, oh, well, it's all very simple. Just get a divorce. Now, apart from the fact divorce is not so easy to get, and we'll talk about how, that wasn't the real point. Simple? You think this is simple? You think to page 491. Siva says, if not, it's very simple. Alexei Alexandrovich's face drawn with distress and muttered something to himself and made no answer. All that seemed so simple, said Arkadyevich, Alexei Alexandrovich had thought over thousands of times. And far from being simple, it all seemed to him utterly impossible. Divorce, the details of which he knew by this time, seemed to him, I'll get the legal thing, because you'd have to lie. I'll explain to you why in a moment. What would become of his son in case of a divorce? To have him with his mother was out of the question. The divorced mother would have her own family, in which his position as a stepson of Vronsky would not be good. Keeping him would be an act of vengeance, perhaps. The words of Darya Alexandrovna, that deciding on divorce, he was thinking of himself, had struck him. And connecting this with his forgiveness of her, with his devotion to the children, he understood it in a new way. To consent to a divorce, to give her freedom, meant in his thoughts to take from him the last ties that bind him to life. The children, notice the plural, whom he loved, and to take from her the last prop that supported her. He also feels responsible that this is not a good way for her to live, and given her ideas about love, she is headed for some sort of disaster, perhaps a series of other liaisons, which will not be good for her children or for herself. He feels that it's not simple. Just the thing with their children is not simple. Right? The last thing is simple. The part about the complications of divorce, under Russian law at the time, the only grounds for divorce was adultery, and the adulterous party would not be legally allowed to remarry. Now, since what Karenina finally does here, out of Christian love, tinged a little bit by the false sense of how virtuous he is, it's already beginning to fade a little bit. Still, instead of being 100% pure, it's now like 90% pure, and the story is showing you the 10% that is sort of a little less. He agrees, and if you would, not only to give her the divorce, and custody of both children, he agrees to plead falsely that he is the adulterous party, so she can marry Morson. Got it? Now, this is not only an act of generosity on his part, because he won't be able to remarry, and he'll take on the appropriate, but he's a religious man, and swearing something false under oath could send him to hell. It's something he takes you might not take it seriously. He takes it very seriously. And yet, he's willing to do all that. And yet, if you go to the end of part 4, you will find that Anna refused the divorce under those terms, that she has not taken Sir George with her, and the question is, why? Well, later, she will say, I had to choose between my son and my lover. Evil society forced this choice on me. And lots of readers of this book have told the story that way. Almost every film tells it that way. And you see, it is patently untrue. He offers her custody of both children. By the way, they're both legally his. He doesn't have to give her either one. He offers her both. She only takes Anna. He offers her the divorce, and she refuses it. And the reason, you'll see, is, I've repeated a couple of times, so that she is not indebted to his generosity. So that she cannot stand that he will come out morally better. Now think about that for a moment. How much can she really care for her son if that is the way she makes a decision as to something so essential to his welfare? Look, if she thought, no, he'll be better off with his father, well, that would be thinking of, might be a mistake, but it would be thinking of him. But to refuse him because she doesn't want to be indebted to his generosity shows no concern for him at all. Do you see the moral problem here? Go to the end, the next to the last page, 495. Vronsky comes running in. They're going to go away. And this is a scene that, if you were staging Anna as a great romance, if you were staging this novel the way Anna herself would tell it, this is the scene you would have. It's filled with every cliche in the book. Anna, he ran up the stairs, seeing no one and nothing, and with a rapid, step, almost breaking into a run, he went into her room, and without noticing whether there was anyone in the room or not, he flung his arms around her and began to cover her face, her hands, her neck with kisses. Can you film this? You see how we film? The camera's turning around and around. Anna, preparing herself for this meeting, had thought what she would say to him, but she did not succeed in saying any of it. His passion overwhelmed her. She tried to calm him, to calm herself, but it was too late. His feeling infected her. Her lips trembled so that for a while she could say nothing. Yes, you have conquered me and I am yours, she said at last, pressing his hands to her bosom. So it had to be. Alluding to fate, he's learned his lessons, you see. So long as we live, it must be so. I know it now. That's true, she said, getting whiter and whiter, putting her arms around his head. Still, there is something terrible in it after all that has happened. It will all pass, it will all pass. We shall be so happy. Our love, if it could be strong, will be strengthened because there is something terrible in it, he said, lifting his head and parting his strong teeth in a smile. And she could not but respond with a smile, not to his words, but to the love in his eyes. She took his hands and stroked her cold cheeks and cropped hair with it. If Tolstoy had written this seriously, we wouldn't be reading this book. It would not be a good book. It would be a piece of romantic drivel. Now, there are some great writers who occasionally have a scene of romantic drivel. I mean, Emily Bronte, for instance, who's a great writer, certainly has them. Charlotte, by the way, her sister, who I think is better, avoids them. But yeah, you can get, Dickens will have them. I hardly know you with the short hair, she says. You've grown so lovely, like a little boy, which is how she likes the submissive setter dog, the little boy. We'll go to Italy. You will grow strong, he said. Can it be possible we could be like husband and wife alone in our family? And then she says, Stiva says that he has agreed to everything, meaning Karenina. But I can't accept his generosity, she said, looking dreamily past Vronsky's face. I don't want a divorce. It's all the same to me. Only I don't know what he will decide about Seryozha. Well, he offers you Seryozha. A month later, Alexei Alexandrovich was left alone with his son in his house at Petersburg, while Anna and Vronsky had gone abroad, not only not having obtained a divorce, but having absolutely refused one. You see, the picture of this, Karenin's cruelty here is just, it's not right at all. Now, later, when he falls into the hands of Lydia Ivanovna, he does become awful. But he isn't here. And she refuses because of this, I don't want his generosity. It doesn't say, it's not that she's cruel, you understand. It's that she is so caught up in the myth of romance. The great romantic love. And among the things in great romantic love is that children are in the way. She will always remember Seryozha. Look, here's a question. She has Annie with her, we find out, and she pays no attention to Annie, can't work up any feeling of love for Annie at all, but she likes to stare at the picture of 4-year-old Seryozha looking so cute. Why? You'd think the reverse, right? Because Annie is a child of the man she loves. Why would... But, now, there are usually two explanations. One explanation of this is okay, but I tend to prefer the other. You remember at the beginning of part 1, Steve likes to pay more attention to his daughter than to his son. Well, girls are more interesting to him. And therefore, the reverse is the case here. Anna pays more attention to her son than her daughter. Maybe there's some truth to that. But I think the real reason is that Annie is there with all her ordinary, prosaic needs, like filthy diapers that need to be changed and all that sort of stuff. But Seryozha you can romanticize as the beautiful, always wonderful 4-year-old child in the photograph. You can romanticize that. All the more so because he's at a distance. I think it's part of the romanticization, you see, that's scripture, which you sincerely believe, you understand. Well, if we now go to part 5, Anna and Vronsky are in Italy. Vronsky dons medieval Italian dress, and he looks very fetching at this. They rent an Italian palazzo. Well, they're rich. They can dress up as much as they like, right? How, by the way, Vronsky has gotten all this money when earlier in the book he didn't have any sympathies. You just have to imagine your own mechanism. And Vronsky, however, is bored. He has nothing in particular to do. And for Tolstoy, for reasons I will tell you, this is always a very bad sign. So he decides to take up painting. And he has some skill at it. He knows how to do something with a brush. And it's not easy, to be able to do that, is, particularly if you've got a lot of formal training, that's something. And so he decides to become a painter. And if you turn to the bottom of page 529, here and in the passages that follow, you get a little of Tolstoy's notion of what real art is. Just as there are real ideas and counterfeit ideas, real ways of thinking and counterfeit ways like Steve's or Strasky's, the same is true of art. There is real art and there is counterfeit art, which looks like real art. Counterfeits always do look like the original. That's what makes them counterfeits, but they're not the same. And here's part of the difference. He, that's Vronsky, at the bottom of 529, had a ready appreciation of art, and for accurately and tastefully imitating it. Notice the word imitate. It's not doing it, but imitating it. And he supposed himself to have the real qualities essential for an artist. And after hesitating for some time about which style of painting to select, religious, historical, realistic, or genre painting, he began painting. He appreciated all kinds and could have felt inspired by any of them. But he had no conception of the possibility of knowing nothing at all of any school of painting, and of being inspired directly by what is within the soul without caring whether what is painted will belong to any recognized school. Since he knew nothing of this, and drew his inspiration not directly from life, but indirectly from life embodied in art, his inspiration came very quickly and easily, and as quickly and easily came his success in painting something very similar to the sort of painting he was trying to imitate. This is the imitation of art. This is an art. Real art, this is Tolstoy, and we're going to see this now because the next passage we're going to meet Mikhailov, who was a real painter, and that's the only reason he's in the book. He doesn't play any role in the plot. But this is Tolstoy's idea of a real artist. What a real artist does is the artist is very, very sensitive to the particularities of experience. Sees things that others do not see. It's that act of noticing and seeing things in the world and the feelings associated with them that makes one an artist. That's what certainly makes Tolstoy an artist, right? He notices the feeling attached to things. And then you have this very particular set of feelings because if you look at any situation in life carefully enough, it is unlike every other situation in life. Things never repeat exactly. And a good artist can see not only what's general, but what is absolutely particular in the situation and in that feeling, and then find a way to convey that feeling to somebody else. Tolstoy calls that process infection. And that is what makes something an art. It comes from, like real reforms, like Kitty's attempt to make herself a better person, from the bottom up, not the top down. It's not applying a theory, for God's sake. It's not doing what Vronsky is doing and saying, okay, what school? Let's see. Okay, I should do something postmodern. That's what's in right now. And postmodern and green, I think, is what we need now. So I'll figure out a way, a story. What story would help me? That's how you do fake art. Learn the lesson, copy it, and it doesn't come from anything in the soul. Anything real. And that is the sort of thing that, listen,